It is about time for us to understand our personal role in the change of this world for the best. So how can Spiritism offer consolation and guidance on overcoming our limitations, and how can it inspire us in finding awareness of goodness? Are we getting ready for the next step in our planetary evolution? Let's welcome Suzana Simoes, who is bringing the talk, Promoting Goodness in the Transition to Regeneration.
Suzana Simoes was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She's a doctor of physical therapy and works as a clinician in geriatric and neurological care, and as an adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern University. Suzana is one of the founders of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in North Miami, Florida, and worked as a member of board of directors of the Spiritist Federation of Florida over 12 years. She is currently a member of the U.S. Federation and an active speaker in the Spiritist movement in the United States. Welcome, Simone.
Good morning. I would like to start sending my friend Kirsten my thoughts, my love, my vibrations for her recovery this morning. And I will do my best to substitute her, not really, just do my own thing here, in talking about the transition that we are currently experiencing. The spirits tell us that our world is transitioning from a world of trials and expiations to a world of regeneration. These two categories of world, trials and expiations and regeneration, together with happy worlds, form a category of intermediary worlds. And we learned that in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 3. Behind us, we have the inferior, the more primitive worlds, and ahead of us, we have the celestial worlds. In this category of intermediary worlds, the common denominator for all these different realms is the presence of evil. What differentiates one from the other is the proportion between evil and good. In such a way, the happy worlds are worlds where evil is almost in existence. So it's something that we aspire, it's something that we dream about. Worlds of trials and expiations are the ones that are characterized still by the prevalence of evil over good. And the regeneration realms are the ones where the scale starts to shift. So from the prevalence of good towards, from the prevalence of evil towards the prevalence of good. So as I hear that, as you all have heard that, the spirits have told us, believe me, it is happening. We are transitioning. I keep asking myself as I open the newspaper every morning to the sad news around the world, as I turn on the television, or simply as I go on my lives day to day, witnessing a lot of religion intolerance, a lot of hatred, a lot of families in wars, a lot of lack of compassion and forgiveness in our world, sometimes a lot of lack of compassion and forgiveness among friends of the same ideal. And I ask myself, how is it exactly that we are transitioning? So in our reflection this morning, we would hope to do 4 things. One is we're going to try with Spiritism to start to uncover the roots of evil, because we can only transform what we understand, what we know. We hope to promote an understanding of the expression of evil in our planet, how it expresses itself. Most importantly, we hope to empower the audience, as it has to a great extent empower myself, with the principles of Spiritism on how to be an active part of the transition and to actually make it happen. And most importantly, we hope to instill hope that there is indeed a solution for the problem of evil, there is a solution for humanity, and there is a solution for you and for me, because we are part of the humanity and the problem is not outside of us. One of the things that is absolutely important for us to realize is that we are an inherent part of the problem. So let's start with a little drop of hope. As we read the gospel again, and in chapter 3, we learn that our planet has actually already gone a transition. We have transitioned from a planet, a primitive planet, to where we are right now. And so, let's understand a little bit about primitive planets and understand where we're going to draw our hope from. Because when we inhabited these planets, we learned with the gospel that life in those realms is characterized by the absolute prevalence of matter. The only concern that the spirit who incarnates in this realm has, from the moment that he or she wakes up to the moment that he or she goes to bed, is to survive. So I wake up in the morning, and my only concern throughout my day is, will I make to the end of this day? Will I be alive by the end of this day? So the spirits tell us that our only concern and need is material. Life is instinctive. Brutal force is the only law. So when I live in this world, I really don't care who you are. I care about making at the end of my day, no matter what. And this is natural, because in these realms of life, intelligence has not yet been developed. And if intelligence has not yet been developed, moral sense has not been developed. And if moral sense has not been developed, the possibility of discerning good from evil is inexistent. Therefore, in these worlds, evil is inexistent. The Spirit says that in these realms of life, what we commit is called natural errors. Let's understand that. It's very simple. If your 1, 2-year-old child throws an object on the floor, do you look at the child and say, "Don't do this, you are evil"? No. You say, this child does not know any better. But if a 40 years old in a tantrum throws an object on the floor or perhaps on someone's head, you will see that differently. I hope. Right? You will see that differently. And the child will sleep that night, and it will never occupy any space in her thinking the fact that she shouldn't really have done that, because she doesn't even understand what she did in first place to have any feelings of guilt. Because we need understanding in having moral sense and in having discernment. So we have evolved. Today, we learn in the book Genesis that as we evolve from one level to another level, our needs change. Therefore, in this stage of evolution, where although we are still in the very inferior scales of evolution, we have taken a step forward, and intelligence tells us that. We are much more intelligent than we were, although our moral life has not caught up yet with our intelligence. But as I have said, as we develop our intelligence, we also develop our moral sense. At this stage of our lives, we have different needs. If before our needs were exclusively material, Genesis tells us that at this point, our needs are semi-material and semi-moral. So things have changed. We have grown up, we now understand, we have the capacity to discern good from bad because we have become intelligent. With the development of intelligence comes also the development of free will. And with the development of free will comes responsibility. This is also easy to understand. So when you are 1 or 2 years old, your free will is pretty much inexistent because you don't know any better. You need someone to decide for you. As you become a teenager, you think that you are the most intelligent person in the world and you know better than anyone else, but that is not true. But you have developed some intelligence, and therefore, the free will of a teenager is greater than the free will of a child. And when you become an adult, it's expected that you are now smarter than you were, and you will make better choices for yourself. Same thing happens spiritually. And why am I saying all of this? Because at this point of our evolution, especially this audience in here, we have grown, we have learned, we have spiritism that explains us a lot of things. God expects that we use our intelligence and our moral sense to override our instincts. And that's what makes us humans. And every time that matter prevails over our intelligence, evil takes place. Those are literal words that we find in Genesis. So we are in a stage that we are invited to use our intelligence and our moral sense to make appropriate choices for ourselves, choices in line with the values that we hold in our hearts. Let me give you an example. If someone comes towards me and criticizes me or is hostile towards me in some way, the animal that lives in me will react. As long as we are in a physical body, instincts will be part of our lives. So you will know what I'm talking about. A rush of adrenaline goes through your body. You have no control over that. Your heart rate goes up, and you feel like a surge of power, of strength within you. At this point, you can do two things. You can attack like the animal, or you can stop like a person. You can give yourself a little bit of time to use what we have conquered, which is intelligence, emotional intelligence, cognitive intelligence, to make an appropriate choice. And you can say to yourself, I would like to strangle this person, but I know better that that will take me to the low zones, so I won't. This is one of the ways in which good will start to prevail in our world. If we become attentive to the signs of instinctive life in us, and we are willing, because we'll see goodness takes will. We need to be willing to do the work of reflection and changing of attitude. Looking at another angle of the issue of evil, the Spirit Emmanuel. I almost had a heart attack because I look at that thing, says 16 minutes. Have I been talking for 16 minutes? But I guess it's going backwards. Okay. So the Spirit Emmanuel in the book, The Consoler, he answers a question and talks about the problem of evil and how evil is not from divine origin. And by answering, Emmanuel says man trusting himself more than in God transforms its frailty into actions contrary to the law of love, creating an indebted intervention in the divine harmony. This is evil. So again, man trusting himself more than in God. And you may say to yourself, I trust God more than I trust myself, and I will challenge you on that statement. Because we Spiritists, we are rebellious souls, but well-behaved ones. And so we don't throw tantrums against God. We don't yell, hey God, what are you doing this to me? No, we murmur, right? Oh my God, like that. We murmur. And if you read the gospel from beginning to end, you will be surprised of how many times the spirits in there tell us that every time we murmur, it means that we have not accepted God's will and we are questioning. Because the spirit who fully trusts God, fully, no matter what comes into his or her life, embraces that, and at every single moment says, thank you, God, because you are my Father. In you I trust my life, and whatever you send in my way, I accept with obedience and resignation. Is that what we do? No, not necessarily. And Emmanuel says that man trusting himself more than God transforms its frailty, because every time we are disconnected from God, we become frail because our strength is in God. Our strength is in the awareness of our divinity. And every time we disconnect from God, we are taken by what Dr. Brené Brown, the social worker, calls a sense of scarcity. And so we feel that we don't have enough. We don't have enough love. We are not loved enough. We are not valued enough. We are not seen enough. And we share as humanity this epidemic of low self-esteem that comes from the disconnection from God. And every time we are in this wounded process of disconnection and frailty, we have two paths ahead of us. And I'm going to talk in the terms that I know the best, which is rehabilitation world. When someone has a big injury and comes to see me, one of the first decisions that I make is, can I recover this person back to normal, or do I need to come up with some compensatory mechanisms to give him or her the best ability to move again? Same thing for the soul. Given this state of disability that we find ourselves, we have two paths. We can choose the path of recovery by investing in our virtues, by every morning telling ourselves about how beautiful, loving, and loved we are. I received a little affirmation when I was in the break, by affirming to ourselves that you don't need to do anything to be and to feel value. The moment that God thought of you, you became valuable. And what that feeling does is allow us to be true brothers and sisters, because we are no longer in the need to compete to anyone, to be special, to be on top, to be under the lights, to be different. Or we can take the other path, which is the path of compensation, which leads to movement, but is always dysfunctional. And so that's what the ego does. A dysfunctional ego will take that frailty and will turn that into selfishness. It will turn that into pride. It will turn that into envy. And all these moral vices that religion recognizes and that end up being what Emmanuel called the in-depth interventions in the law of love, because once I am selfish, envious, jealous, and proud, I hurt others, but I hurt first myself. And I break the harmony because I go against the flow of life. I go against the flow of love. The last angle that I want to bring to you about the issue of evil is brought by Minister Sanzio in the book Action and Reaction. There, Minister Sanzio teaches us that evil is a sad tendency to do good to ourselves. Evil is the sad tendency to do good to ourselves. So when we think about what is good for me and only for me, and we are blind to what's happening to everyone else around us, that is, according to this minister, who materialized from the higher realms to André Luiz Indruzo, so is no little guy here, he tells us that this is evil. Question 629 of the Spirit's book. Kardec asked the Spirits, what is moral? And the Spirits answer by saying that correct behavior is to do everything for the good of all. For the good of all. That is to obey God's laws. So on one end, good for me is evil. Good for all means the obedience of God's law. In Kardec, in question 895, one of my favorites of the Spirit's book, he says to the Spirits, hey, you listen, I can really see and identify many of the moral vices and imperfections of our humanity. But if you had to point out what is the most characteristic sign of imperfection, what would that be? And the Spirit said, self-interest. Very quickly, self-interest works like this. You are in the traffic. You're in a hurry. You were late. Your kids gave you a headache this morning. That's my life every day. And you are trying to get to work. You stop in traffic. Someone in front of you decides during the red light to pick up the phone and check their messages. The light turns green and you honk. And you're like, oh my God, what's wrong with this person? He does not know that I need to be at work on time. He does not know that I am in a hurry. The next day, you're going to work, and now you have all the time. So you stop on the light, and you pick up your phone, and you are now checking your messages. And someone behind you honks, and you say, oh my God, what's wrong with this person? Why is he in such a hurry? Why all this madness? So what that means is that we are looking at the world, perceiving the world always, entirely from our own perspective. So goodness, my dear brothers and friends, is learning to do what Jesus said. Put yourself in someone else's shoes for 1 second. Let's try to get out of ourselves. Let's try to leave the center of the stage and allow everybody to take a place together and try to listen truly what each other has to say so that goodness can start to prevail. To which extent should I attempt to do good to all creatures at the expenses of myself? Should I? Minister Sanzio says that our reference for goodness is Jesus. He is the paradigm of eternal good on earth. This is in action and reaction. Having given himself completely to the benefit of others, he did not hesitate to accept the supreme sacrifice on behalf of all, so that good for all could prevail, even though only incomprehension and suffering, flagellation and death were reserved for him personally. So to which extent should I do good for all? To the maximal extent. To the extent of sacrificing my own personal interest and my own comfort? Yes. Absolutely yes. If Jesus is your reference, That should be the work. So in summary, I talk about 3 different angles in which we can look at evil. We can understand evil as being a leftover from our evolution process. So what's the solution? The solution is to empower the human in us over the animal in us, right? So let's practice being human beings. Let's use the power of our intelligence. Let's try on our day-to-day not to react so much, but to act a little bit more. We talk about our separation from God. Let's try to walk back towards God. But I have some really shocking news. You will not get to God by pushing anyone out of your way. So if there's people in your life that you don't tolerate, people in your life where you have unresolved business, they are precisely the way back to God. Now sleep with that and call me another day. If you experience frailty, goodness means invest in the virtues. Read the gospel. Read the gospel. Because the gospel is a summary of attitudes, references that we should follow in order to practice good. Because the kingdom of heaven that Jesus had promised us comes with the practice of goodness. So the gospel says, shocking news too, charity is to tolerate one another. We take pride in ourselves for feeding the poor, dressing the poor, and yet, a lot of times, within the institution where we work in, we have a difficult time, listen to me, not loving, tolerating one another. And these are not my words. If you read the gospel, I am literally citing the words of the gospel. So let's work on reading the gospel, not to be another set of cognitive laws that we embrace in our minds, but to be truly something that we will commit to live or to try to live in each days of our lives. And lastly, we look at the role of self-interest. So every time we make a decision, ask yourself, who this decision serves? Does it serve me? Or does it serve the majority of people that I am with? And that should help us in practicing more good than to practice evil. Now, 3 minutes left, lots of work. And it takes a lot of work. So to do evil, the thing is, to do evil, it takes nothing, literally. To do evil takes negligence and indifference. But to do good takes this tremendous amount of work that I try to summarize for you in 30 minutes. So in order to do that, we need to cooperate with the law of God. Cooperate. We need to want to cooperate. What does that mean in practical terms? I had a disagreement with the doctor that I work with, and I am no good thing yet. So I confronted her. I went home, and because I'm no longer 2 years old and I know better, I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, when I go back to work, I have 2 options. I can let my ego drive me and say, I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to readdress this, which is truly what I wanted to do. Or I can say to myself, you know what? I need to cooperate with the law of love in favor of myself and in favor of the transition that I want to see happening. How can I expect the end of the wars out there if I cannot end my own wars? And so, whether you want it or not, the gospel says we must be obedient. And so when it doesn't come yet naturally, you say to yourself, I will choose to obey the law and I will ask for forgiveness. And if humbleness does not come naturally, we will practice it from the outside in until it becomes a virtue and manifests from the inside out. And the last thing that I would like to say that gives us the most hope of all is that evil is the absence of good, as cold is the absence of heat, a statement that you find also in Genesis. But the absence is always relative because we are divine creatures. So goodness is our essence. It could not be anything else. So if good is absent, it's not because it's an absolute absence, it's a relative absence. It's absent because we have yet to unfold, to nurture, and to discover the God that lives within us. And if that is true for you, and for you, it is also true for the people that we think to be the most horrific out there. Because they too are good. Because they too are children of God. And so, my dear friends, there is hope and there is work for all of us to do. Let me finish with a quote by one of my favorite authors in Spiritism, Leon Denis. And forgive me, this is a last-minute lecture that I put together, so I couldn't find the text. It's a free translation. It's not going to be perfect. Everyone will learn, grow, elevate himself, herself, throughout the cycles of time. The criminals from the past will be the wise from the future. They will come when all our mistakes will be erased. Our vices and more wounds will be healed. The frivolous souls will be serious. The darkened intelligences will be enlightened. All the evil forces that vibrate within us will be transformed in the forces of good. From the frail and indifferent soul will rise with time a powerful spirit that will gather all knowledge and qualities and will be capable of the most sublime realizations. Thank you.